So I mean, I think we threw up some names like plasma or state channels, but what does it mean, right? So can you give me, like, for example, like we were state channels, we were plasma. Is there anything else? And if not, can you maybe explain, like in a few words, what does it mean plasma? What does it mean state channel?
I'm not technical, so I'll just opine very quickly. There are too many second layer solutions. In my view, you know, just like there are too many blockchains today, you know, you want everything to be interoperable. And when there are all these different second layer solutions, many of which have their own token, which is absolutely idiotic in my view, for the most part, you know, you create more friction, not less. Now I'll let the actual developers opine.
Well, okay. So how about you guys? Like, you're working on a plasma, like you guys are working on plasma, you're more...
And I like plasma.
Okay.
Plasma is great.
Okay, awesome. So maybe can you start by what is plasma in like a few words, and then maybe you can introduce the concept of state channels, and then we can start talking about the differences.
So plasma is a way for, it's a framework so blockchains can run on top of other blockchains. So in some sense, it's delegating some operations to another blockchain, but ultimately you go back to the main chain. It's kind of like the hierarchy of different courtrooms. You don't go to the Supreme Court of Justice for a minor offense. Yeah. So Plasma allows you to create a hierarchy of different blockchains for different usages. I think that's the best way to explain that. Of course, you can always use your own side chain. It's also a layer 2 solution in some sense because you don't need any permission to run a Plasma sidechain, or that's the idea at least. That you don't need any blockchain-based layer changes for Plasma to work. That's the basic idea.
Yeah, I always like to think of them just in terms of structural pieces. Like a Plasma is kind of like a side chain, so you have like the main chain, which is Ethereum, which is just one giant instance of a distributed database. It's one shared database. And then we have like a side chain, right, where it's a separate node. It's its own, let's say it's running an EVM or running whatever some kind of a blockchain. And the idea of how do you bridge those two networks, because now you can have your own, perhaps a DApp-specific chain that has persistence of your information just there, not on the main chain, which would make a lot of sense because you don't need to persist certain kind of data that you would normally store in your application-specific database, but you still want it to be federated and connected to the main chain because you want to exchange value and you want to bring users to go back and forth, and you can attribute different security properties and different performance properties on your own sidechain. And then Plasma chain is kind of the issue with the sidechain, of course, and I just like to think of it in those levels because, you know, sidechain is quite simple. You just kind of like, you make a deposit on the main chain and say, okay, I'm gonna lock up my funds here, and then the sidechain is gonna notice that in the contract and say, okay, you've locked up your NFTs or some funds, and then I'm gonna make them available for you here on the sidechain, and then you can utilize them here. Whenever you want to exit the sidechain to go back to the mainnet, you'll actually hit the contract up on the sidechain and say, okay, I'm ready to leave. I want to exit, so then say, please lock up my funds here, mint them back, unlock them here, and then burn them on the sidechain. That's essentially just the way this stuff works, like a very simple bridge. And there's things out there like a parity bridge made by the parity guys, which is actually incredibly capable. It works very well as a proof of authority based consensus model, which is kind of a little bit of a centralized one. Another problem with the sidechain, I like to set those basics, is that if the sidechain were to go away, whether it's a POA or a POS or whatever, meaning that the people who are running that sidechain, that side network, were to be DDoSed or decide to disappear while you're on that network, what happens is you can't ask the sidechain now to unlock your funds. So your funds are kind of or your tokens are stuck there. And that's the fundamental issue with the sidechain in terms of the security guarantee that you cannot exit under all conditions. Whereas a Plasma chain, the big distinction is that you can always, no matter what happens on the sidechain, you can always go to the main chain and you can exit from the main chain, even because you have this UTXO, this property that you can go there and make a proof that you can always receive your funds back as to how they've been spent. and there's different challenge periods and stuff like that, and it gets very complex, and there's various implementations. So, and a state channel is a bit different in that it is even though it's a layer 2 kind of thing, is that it's not a sidechain because it's not persisting on a separate blockchain. It's essentially, it's off-chain, it's kind of more ethereal. It's really happening on something that doesn't get persisted. It's all being just agreed upon state that can be always provable on the main chain. So as a result, it's actually a simpler architecture. And it's in fact even more secure. It's really the only thing that is actually real right now, to be quite honest. And that's what we're trying to be figured out otherwise. So anyways, that's the distinction.
And one thing I'll add is that for the most part, any second layer solution typically is not being validated in real time but on the main chain. It's only when you kind of close that state channel or move back to the main chain, or all those transactions that were on the second layer getting validated on the main chain. That's really important to know. That you won't see that, you won't see those changes taking place in the second layer while you're transacting in it.
Yeah, that's very important. There's a word going around called counterfactual that puzzles a lot of people until you realize it means that eventually it can be on the blockchain. So whenever you read counterfactual, it's okay, eventually I can go on the main chain and I will get my tokens or I will get my money.
It's just a really clever trick, that counterfactual stuff. And it's very well.
And it's what makes second layer solutions much more scalable than blockchains. Because when everything's being validated in real time, it's very computationally intensive. But when you take it off chain, it's a lot easier to do and then validate it all at once.
Peter explained very well about Plasma. I want to add something in that level. So basically, whenever something goes wrong on the sidechain, you basically exit, right? But you also can add the crypto economic incentives to make sure okay your chain lives like forever kind of thing. But yeah, that's how Plasma works basically.
I mean, we would argue that also like Lightning Network works in like in the same way. Like you transfer funds into the channel, then if you close the channel with somebody else's, then like something happens, you can always kind of like the state gets like communicated with blockchain. So like basically you never lose. Like it's a second layer until everything goes fine. It's there, and then it kind of get broadcasted down. So it's kind of the same principle. Which is the thing that you guys think. It's gonna be like so like which in terms of like layer 2, right? So like I've read a bunch of ideas there. This idea that you have to pre-fund channels, for example. Lightning is gonna open up like a new capital market for Bitcoin. So big holders are gonna stake money into these kind of networks of channels, and people are gonna pay like a bunch of fees to kind of like use their money as a transfer for their own money. And do you see the same, like, what's the economic consequence of any layer 2? Have you imagined, like, what's the economic consequence of Plasma? What's the economic consequence of any stake channel? Like, how does it, what do you expect how do you expect the crypto economic kind of to change with these solutions?
Well, you know, it allows blockchains to actually fulfill their vision. Because right now, like, we've come to the realization, like, cryptocurrency isn't a thing. Like, you know, Bitcoin has not scaled, you know, Ethereum gets clogged by CryptoKitties, like, you know, right now the state of blockchain technology is not like overwhelmingly impressive. We need something that allows for applications to operate much more frictionlessly. And it's with the realization that we're going to have to sacrifice some of the total decentralization that we initially envisioned with either Bitcoin or Ethereum, you know, Lightning Network or Plasma. You know, you are making a bit of a sacrifice here, and there are crypto economic considerations. Like, I would not suggest you do a multi-billion-dollar transaction on the Lightning Network or on Plasma, not now and maybe not ever, simply because you don't have the total trustlessness of a fully decentralized blockchain.
State channels are